is, who's the lady sitting next to Joe? So you have to, thank you very much. Now, where's Joanne? She's taking my notes. On this side. They do. And it was so funny because one lady said
One thing about it, next year like this, we don't have to worry about all of our kids.
you should have taken it first. Look at it. You were good.
You look okay. Well, that's pretty bad. I'd offer to sit on the floor, but I'd never get up again.
I would sit on the
Get me out of here. I'll see you in the picture.
I was so sad yesterday. I won't be in that picture. Right.
How you doing, Joe? Everybody look this way.
Yeah, I'm still working a couple.
Did you have the blinker on?
I don't know, Ruth.
You pull that out at the side there, on your left side. It pulls out.
Yeah,
that's it, right?
I'm gonna snap one more.
Did it flash? It did.
My turn now.
Well, I'll tell them one thing. People that went to small schools don't have the appreciation of the shit.
I don't know, I don't think I
Go to a big school.
She almost fast enough.
There was 845 in my graduating class.
Can you use that? I'm just so pleased with the gatherings and the response. We didn't know when we started this, we've been gonna do it for I don't know how long. Different ones have talked and said, yeah. And finally, Louise and I just put our heads together and we said, hey, let's do it. Let's not wait any longer. Before we start, I would like to mention one thing. We have, of course, been allowed to use these rooms through the courtesy of the senior citizens. And we would appreciate your help if you can with the fee for the use of the rooms this afternoon. Anyone that would like to help us, there's a basket, I think, over there on the table. And we would appreciate any help you can give us. We have the rooms until 4 o'clock this afternoon.
How much do they charge?
Seven and a half an hour. Just for the benefit, a lot of us that have stayed right here in Geneseo area, we see each other often and of course we know each other. But I'm going to ask each of the pupils from Munson Center if they would introduce themselves and also our guests. And
I'm Marlene Jeanette, daughter.
Louder, please, we can't hear you, dear.
I'm Gary Munson, Ruth's son.
Eli Jones, my wife, Ellen.
And Beatrice Young, here. My husband's working.
Keith Reese, my wife Phyllis.
Denise Vandersnick, Portia.
Bill Young.
You're Albright Edwards, my husband Horace.
Doris Albright, Dublick. That's my husband Ray. Catherine Young, only come from Davenport.
Jill Holtz, say I belong to this.
I'm Louise. This is my sister. Right.
you want to come up here, Louise? You're going to have to come up here.
Talk loud, please. Talk loud.
Yeah, Bill says we have.
Some of our hearing is failing.
As most of you know, Carol Reeves is in the hospital. And he's been very serious and he's getting along well, they tell us, right? That's what he told me this morning. The doctor says I'm doing well. I asked him if there was anything he could think of, the memories of school and all this. And I remember when the Luises moved into our neighborhood. They lived where Sid Majorkirk lives now. And I remember the first morning that Carol went to school. And we knew there was a young man down there at that house. So naturally I was ready to walk with him. Carol was in the fifth grade, and I think I was in the second, I believe, I'm not sure. Anyway, so I said, is there anything you'd like for us to say for you? And he said, well, one thing that he remembered really well was when the long house burned, the house down west of the schoolhouse, across from the brick school which Elon now owns, which was his father's and our grandfather's and so forth. He said it was just like a ball of fire, and it just went poof, it was gone. And I remember that well, don't you?
Yes,
Read, Fern? And then, how many of you remember Dummy Kane? That was yeah, he always came up and he loved to come to the programs. And of course, he was deaf and dumb. And he came one night, and Ruth and I were talking about this the other day. He came one night, and of course Charlie Holston was the hired man, and he was the overseer of the inmates and all that. And he found out that Dummy was up at the schoolhouse. So he came along, and he decided he shouldn't be there. And so he proceeded to take him out, and Dummy had a knife. I guess he didn't make an incision, did he? No, there was blood on the floor.
Was there blood on the floor? Okay, you would remember that best, I guess. But anyway, Carol said I remember that very well.
He had paid for his ticket. That was why he got it. He had paid for his ticket.
And he wouldn't have bothered anybody, would he, if they'd have just left him
No,
alone?
he wouldn't have hurt anyone.
Because he had come lots of times.
Right.
So I guess that's all I have to say from Carol. Howard Swigert. Howard lives in Florida. And then, shall I say who we don't know where they are? Does anyone know about Ellen Stonewall? Yeah, other than all of a sudden I become blank. Willesine, who? Howard Glass is dead.
Wasn't there a sister
Were any of those girls,
Brief memorial service, those that went to school at the time we were there, but are no longer with us. I will read their names, and I want you to think of them as I read a short poem as part of our memorial service. Charlotte Young Majorkirk, Orville Howlett, Albert Moscow, Howard Vandersnick, Arma Bain, Howard Glass, Violet Young Kleinow, Richard Stewart, Marjorie May Peterson White, Joyce Albright Loman. These were the ones that we found in going through the records and not wanting to slight anyone. If there's anyone that we have missed or any of these that we could not contact that also are not with us any longer, we would remember them also. After the winter comes the spring to show us again that in everything there's always renewal, divinely planned, flawlessly perfect, the work of God's hand. And just like the seasons that come and go, when the flowers of spring lay buried in snow, God sends to the heart in its winter of sadness a springtime awakening of new hope and gladness, and loved ones who sleep in a season of death will too be awakened by God's life-giving breath. And this is from Helen Steiner Wright. If my head this way, it always went up and down, but I'm learning as I get older anyway. But I'm glad to be able to do this. I'm just so glad that we could get together. And now we'd like to have a little on the lighter side. We're going to give each one of you, if there's any of you, a chance to have any thoughts that you would like to express at this time first. And then we're going to ask Mrs. Munson also. Would you like to?
May I mention?
In the crystal. Now remember, this person that wrote this is in 1932. Put your mind back.
I found this in my record, so I
And
thought you should.
this is an 8th grade student that wrote this, and that's all I'm going to say about it right now. Peering through the crystal with a great load of fish. Then there's Violet Young, the lady of fashion, who from house to house is always a dashing. Joyce Albright, too, she is a smart one, has gone through 8 colleges and still is again. Marjorie May Peterson runs a beauty shop. She's installed an electric chair to make the customers hot. Vera Jean Albright is a school teacher. She lives near a little church where her husband's a preacher. Arlene Snow is Mrs. Moscow now. Albert's her husband. Is he a wow? And like all modern people, as a matter of course, no sooner been married than they got a divorce. And now Albert has a girl named Minnie, who is 10 yards around. She weighs a ton in her stocking feet and covers an acre of ground. And this seems to be the way of Albert's luck, to take her to a circus he had to use a truck. Howard W. Glass is a guy who sure can jig. Also, he's the feller who tore up Albert's wig. Now, there must be a meaning to this someplace, I don't know. Whirling W. Houghton sings over the radio. He is a great star. His mother said so. Carol W. Weiss runs a goose farm. Once a gander bit his leg, but didn't do no harm. He keeps a dozen hens, but they never lay an egg. The only way they get their eats is if ever is to go around and beg. Richard Stewart, he's a professor. Young is now a nurse. All saying may come true, 'cause she makes the sick ones worse and the well unhappy too. And there's a doctor who lives in the room above. I think it is with him that Louise is in love. Doris Albright is in a circus, as the whole world knew she'd be, being there always because she wants the world to see. And if you're a fairy or elf, you can finish the rest yourself. Orma, you'll know for sure she's the boss of the house. Orville Howlett's a lawyer. He makes out deeds and wills, and it sure keeps him again to pay his wife's beauty bills. And his first hard case was naturally, of course, a case of trying to keep his wife from getting a divorce. Elin Young, he raises fine hogs. They get very fat, just like logs. He's always a-working with shovel and fork. Now he supplies the world with fresh lard and pork. He's a bachelor. He just won't get married. He says he'd just as soon be ground up and buried. The crystal grows dark, and it's time to stop, and we hope your long lives will not be a flop. Her that I thought I had the most beautiful teacher that there ever was. I just thought she was just so pretty. When I remember coming home and telling Mother how pretty she was. And the other thing I remember is Howard Vandersnick was in 8th grade when I was in there, and sometimes he had to be disciplined. And one day, I think the teacher had to use a little, let's say she had a ruler in her hand, and anyway, to get his attention, she hit the side of his desk, because I don't know what he was doing, something, and she come down and hit the side of his desk, and of course the foot ruler broke in two, and one part went flying. I thought she had hit poor Howard on the arm and broke his arm, and that was a bone flying. I really believed that. They had a time, I remember, I just really believed that. But like I say, I really don't have a lot of memories. I do remember just very vaguely. But we'll go on around, and if there's anyone, just go around the circle. But if you'll come up here and stand.
Well, I'm a beautiful teacher. I'd always look at her, and why she's so stately and so pretty, and she was a good teacher and emphasizing the importance of reading well. And to this day, I find that this is so important for each and every one of us, regardless of our years, that if we have an interest in reading, that it really helps us get along. I do think of that so often, Miss Lynn Wilson, how great it was to be under your tutelage.
I could have learned more, but I'm kind of slow. But, I was helping build fires, little odd jobs around. And I remember when Christmas, Howard Vandersnick and I and Howard Gladys kind of traded around. We each got a box of candy, and Belle thought, well, Howard would come home without any candy. Felt kind of bad, so she told the teacher that, she said to me, she said, I think that Howard should give a half box to Howard Glass, and I should give a half. Right then I thought, well, that don't sound right. He's appointed for the whole box, and we only had a half box. So I guess that's. I think that sometimes we tease her more than we should. We really got under her height or so on. But otherwise, it was a good school. They didn't have to close the school down to get me out, but I was there 8 years.
First grade teacher, I think she came when I was in 3rd grade, I remember for sure. But I went home after my first day of school and cried. And my mother wanted to know, why was I crying? And I said, well, you said that when I went to school, I'd learn to read. And I didn't learn to read at first. But I can remember those big boxes of books that she got from the county. I don't know whether it was once a month. She brought about 50 books, so we'd all have books to read, and that was always important. And while I'm on my feet, I want to say thank you to Gwen and to Louise for making the effort to get this together, because those of us who live out of town, we benefit from all the work that you do. The other thing I want to say, I guess, is a tribute to Ruth. Living in a large city, people are rather shocked that I went to a one-room school. And sometimes this has come out in conversation. You did, they said. And I never felt my education was any less than anyone who went to a very large school with many teachers.
fun for every subject. So I want to thank you for that.
Well, I was pretty young when I was there, Munson Center. I think I was there at Ruth for first and second grade. I don't know about third grade. But, she tells a story that I fell asleep on her lap one day. And I also think I called her mother one day. But I guess I depended on her. And the thing I remember most about school, and this was probably,
Louder,
Yeah.
Bob.
I think this was after Ruth had left, but I remember going over in the pasture, Dorman's pasture, we called it, across the road from school, and playing baseball games over there, and we also went over there and went sledding in the wintertime, and had a great time. I think I also remember the incident of that ruler getting broken on Howard Vandersnick. I thought it was on his hand, maybe it was on the desk. But that stuck in my mind for a long while. And I think I was teacher's pet, because I got a report card over here, and she tried to butter me up all she could.
Inspiration, for sure. I think other than the fact when I had to have my tonsils out later on, and I missed some school, I did a pretty good job after I once got out of school.
I have to admit, my memory with Ruth goes a long time. I can remember when I started school, there were some conferences between my mother and Ruth. I think my father got in on some of those. Boy, it was way over my head. But as the old family neighborhood of Munson was, they had already figured I was going to make 8 years alone. So Ruth said, poor Billy can take 2 years at once. Then I spent 8 years with a class of girls. I had Vera, Bernice. You're going to have to help me. There was the 2 Franks girls.
Violet.
And Violet. So I finished my grade school years with that class of girls. And I don't know if that was a pro or con taking 2 years at once. She struggled with me, I know, for the late years, for the 4 years she was there after I got started. And the one incident in school that always stuck out in my mind, being the little squirt in school, and Elam was the big boy, the big buddy. And Ruth drove a Model T Ford. I think it's in one of those pictures up there. I think her dad furnished her that, and she started to teach. Well, I think some of our students have suffered those little consequences too, Ruth. But the county home has already been mentioned here. I think the Munson Center School kind of depended on that for some amenities once in a while. I don't know what the occasion was, but there was a day came up that we needed something from the home. Well, Ruth couldn't leave a school full of kids. But I remember Elam taking that Model T Ford and driving down to the county farm to pick up what we wanted and brought it back. And you think of a big boy. Boy, a little guy like me, he got to take the teacher's car. But his dad had one of those, and I think he had mastered driving it a long time before that. And but after Ruth left the school, it wasn't too many years till I became associated with the family again. They lived right south of my folks a little ways, and it was part of my dad's threshing run. If any of you can remember the years of 34, 5, and 6, they said we never had 2 droughts back to back. But farmers didn't make much money those years, and my dad said, you're old enough, you can sit on the tractor. Nobody's going to pay their threshing bill anyway, and I'm not going to expect them to. But there was 2 Lindquist girls and their mother that spoiled that little boy very bad. I got royal treatment at the dinner table. I got lunch in the morning. I got lunch in the afternoon. And I
learned since that was a kind of a neighborhood tradition and Swede upcoming.
Yes, from my teacher. And I also thought that I really loved Whirling Halding and Howard Swanker. I was. I had 5 years with Ruth, and I was thinking when I was eating that first she was Miss Lindquist, and then we kind of moved up to Mrs. Munson, and now we're all back to Ruth. And it was some very special years. And I think Whirling really said it all for me when he said about the reading. I'm a reader yet to this day. And sometimes if I go to the library and come home with several books, I can kind of hear a very low moan. Because Ray knows that once I start a book, I live that book. He can run the television as loud as he can, and I don't even hear it. That's what reading is to me. And also, I carried it on to my children. I didn't have a lot of patience, but one thing I could do was read to them. And I read to our boys when they were just babes in arms. And I learned that even when they were sick and real cranky, that a picture book and reading a story did more than rocking or walking the floor as far as our boys were concerned. So, Ruth, you can take credit. Our boys are avid readers today, always have been. But I got about 3 just little tiny things I want to tell, and one's going to be about Vera. Because Vera never tells stories on herself. But as most of you remember, the 1.5 miles east of Munson Center School in the spring of the year was mud. And I mean mud. So in order to get to school, Dad would bring us in a wagon and a team of horses, and there were 2 hills that, well, he always told us they had springs under them, and the water would come out. And so the horses would have to lunge, and Vera would scream, and I mean scream, because she thought the horses were going to fall down, and the wagon was going to go in the ditch, and we were all going to just have had it. And the other thing, Bill and Bob had it made. I couldn't sit by them today, so I don't know, and they're my relation, so I can say this. They didn't like a lot of things to eat, especially things you carried in a lunch pail. And so come time for noon, and here'd come their mother in the car with the picnic basket with a nice white towel over the top. And there was, sometimes they'd have roast beef and mashed potatoes and gravy. And the rest of our lunches didn't look very good. We kind of envied them.
And I'm not going to live forever. Boy, we got busy. Didn't we? And like I say, I think we're real proud to have had Gary, Marlene, and Joanne with us today as Ruth's family. Maybe they'd like to say something. Do you remember any of this that she's been talking about? Anyway, I think we've had a good turnout today. And I think it's really great that everybody came forth. And like Doris said, I can remember when the mothers started taking turns on bringing hot lunches to school.
Joanne's
think
mother
one-
made very special soup.
And Joanne's mother made special rolls. Right? Do you do that too?
No, Joanne does not, and I sure wish I had that soup recipe.
Right.
I remember it.
Anyway, I'm sure there's a lot of things that we'll go away from here and remember later, but we're going to give you a chance. Yeah. Vera wants a chance too. I told told you a while ago you were.
Oh, maybe we'll just bypass her.
It's all yours. Okay. I got a lot of paper here, but, I'll try to get through it as fast as I can. I wrote this down because my memory isn't terrific as it used to be. Too good, I think. To my dear pupils, what can I say? Little did I think in 1934, 58 years ago, that I would be reunited again, especially at a great party like this. This is a wonderful occasion for me, and I hope that it is for you. To think that you are willing to come and reminisce with me, your old teacher, who is now a very old lady. Thank you so much for all your efforts, especially Louise Halsey and Joanne Hoffmeister. They have done much in planning this, and as was said before, we've talked about this for years. We have all discussed this many times, and I'm glad that it did come to pass, and I thank God for this. My first year of teaching was at Vail School when I was just out of Northern University, DeKalb. I received $95 a month because the board member said that he would give me 100, but I hadn't. He said, you can't teach before. So we'll give you 95. So then when I went to resign and when I went to Munson Center, I received the big check of $100. And remember, that was only 8.5 months. And Bill's father used to ask me when he gave me the check, what did I do with all that money? So at the building, when I went to Munson Center, the building wasn't too old. It was modern and the roads were good. And I drove a Model T, which had a homemade heater in it. I froze my nose one morning while driving to school, and I really felt it for years. By the way, the schoolhouse was colder inside than outside on Monday morning. We banked the fire. I'm talking now about Elin Young. We banked the fire in the furnace in those days. Most people would not know what that means these days. You cover the fire and you leave one side of it open so that the coals would smolder slowly all night. That was before, I guess that was a stage of automatic heating. And the coal was purchased at the Atkinson coal mine, and it was so smoky and fine. Elin had banked the fire one night, and I went downstairs to check the furnace before going home. I opened the furnace door, and what do you think happened? The fire exploded, and I was thrown back into the coal room. I received only singed eyebrows, but a terrible scare. I don't know what could have happened. Elin says that I really scolded him. Of course, I wouldn't do that. He said, you really got mad. And I said, so, I'm sure that I did. There was a water cooler installed, so we didn't have to drink water out of a pail and a bucket, or a pail and a dipper. That's what it's called. But in the spring and fall, we played baseball and other games. In the winter, my problem was getting you kids to come in from the field where we coasted. I would have let you stay out longer, but I was afraid that a board member might come along and see us out there too long or too late. My school board considered a Mrs. Snow, Arlene's mother, Lauren Obrecht, Doris and Vera's father,
and William Young, Bill and Bob's father. They were so intellectually minded and far-sighted regarding the importance of education that they were so generous in providing the necessary materials necessary for the process of a better education. I remember the hundreds of books that we would buy and also bring out from our library that were enthusiastically read by most students. I wish that I could remember some of the first grade series that one time was recommended by the county office. It did not include phonics like we had been teaching. It was based on sight reading and the long phrases. I remember holding those long cards out. And it seemed that you learned to read regardless, but that didn't go on for too long. We had 8th grade graduation in '34. I think it was Orma Bain, Arlene, Snow, Carol Weiss, and Howard Vandersnake. The tests, I remember we went to the county superintendent's office in Cambridge, and the tests that you passed were very difficult. I don't know if some of the high school kids could pass that test now. We organized a national PTA, which became very successful and joined the members of our district. We had several good plays. I hope you saw the copies of some of the plays that I gave you to look at. And the adults taking part were very enthusiastic, and we had a lot of fun. Remember, our school was dedicated as one of 5 super schools by the State Superintendent Blair from Springfield, Illinois. And he came to dedicate the school from Springfield. This was a great honor. Students in country one-room schools heard all classes of other students year after year. Today, this would be called reinforcement of subjects. This is very true. When this was copied and tried by our modern schools, in fact, I told my principal in Cambridge that you are only copying what we did in the country school years ago. And there again, you have your reinforcement because you weren't supposed to sit there and listen, but you couldn't help it, I'm sure, when the classes were held up in front. Do you remember the box socials? Oscar, my future husband, liked to come, and he liked you all. You were all great pupils, and I know that I made many mistakes. But I did not like to leave, but I felt I had been there 5 years, and I had the opportunity to go into the Cambridge school, and I could give up my old Model T and ride with my sister in a Chevrolet. That was one thing that I thought of us. And you mentioned that Bob mentioned that he fell asleep on my lap, which I did. I remember sitting there and not getting up. And I think that, as I remember, you were all good students, and we didn't have television so I imagine you did your homework. But like I said, I know that I made many mistakes, but I just can't thank you enough for this. And this is I'm sure this is a very unusual thing for such a nice bunch of little people, as I remember you. Some of you were very tiny. A couple of girls, I told how tiny they were. And I cannot remember anything very bad. I do remember about Howard Vandersnake. But one time I said, I think you should stay after school. And he said, well, that would be a pleasure. So then I got that out of my mind. And like I said, on the playground, we had a lot of fun. In those days, you were principal, you were disciplinarian, you were janitor, you were PE teacher, you were a music teacher. And in last night's, or I don't know if it's today's paper, talking about the school teachers should earn 30, at least, should at least get 40,000 a year. They should be paid better than they are in the professional line. And I'm sure many of them are paid that well. But we didn't think about that. Or somebody said, well, things were so much cheaper in those days. Well, that's true, they were. But, I don't know. I always wanted to be a teacher. I never had wanted to do anything else. But thank you so much. You were all such good kids. All of you. Thanks a lot. There we go. I remember the box socials. They used to run the box up on our street. They did that. They got together on that. I remember that.
My dad.
And I would like to say about the reading of the books. Sometime, I don't know whether Arlene told me, it was when she was in high school, Mr. Rivenberg, the English class, asked a question and she could answer it. And he said, she was the only one in the class. And in those days, when you came from the country, you were not supposed to be as well educated as ones of your country. And she could answer, and he said, where did you learn that? And she said, I read it out in the country school. If you read a lot, I think you did, you educated yourselves. And you did it. I remember we had workbooks that were so excellent, I wish I could remember the name, that you could check and do it yourselves. So there was some very good materials in those days.
Okay, that kind of brings to the close of the things we have planned for this afternoon. We just have one other little thing here. We've got just a little something for you to remember this afternoon by.
Oh,
And we hope that when you look at it, you'll think of all of them who might be school.
well, I still have wonderful gifts that you gave me all through the years, So I really shouldn't have any more.
Did you get 5 teaspoons? Ruth,
Pardon?
did you get 5 teaspoons or only 4?
Did I what?
Teaspoons?
Oh, I think I got 5.
Well,
Oh, you mean, what do you mean?
From the school kids, the school kids used to give you something,
know,
but then
I
there was
know.
one special thing.
I
And I
think,
remembered one time my mother saying that she thought they should have bought 2 teaspoons one year. But I suppose they didn't know then that you were leaving, because then you would have had a half a dozen. And I just wondered about that. I've thought of that many times.
I know I have 4 or 5. I can't remember just which. Look at this. Who did this?
Oh, I saw.
Who did it? Did you, Joanne?
Louise, you did it? Oh, that's beautiful.
Don't look for mistakes, you might find some.
Huh?
Thank you
Don't
so
look for
much.
mistakes,
You
you
want
might
to
find some.
Has everyone seen it? No.
Very nice.
It looks better from a distance.
Well, all beautiful paintings.